So when you got this matchup this week coming up for Philly, Philly's 7-1, right? So I'll tell you how big this game is on Sunday. That this game is so big that, hypothetically, the Birds lose this game. Cowboys beat the Giants next week. They've made up the half game. They're in first place with the tiebreaker. And then when you come out of the bye, you have to play the Chiefs in Kansas City. And they're playing the Panthers. Then you got Seattle and Buffalo and the 49ers. This is a pretty big stretch here. Plus, you get to go into your bye 8-1. So, hey, Merrill Reese says this all the time. This league is a week-to-week proposition. It could change at any moment. You know, this is what makes this team, I think, better than Dallas. You know what it is? They're not looking to go 14-3. They're looking to go 1-0 every week. 1-0. And I think that's how this next guy looks at it too. And he is our dear friend. He is Merrill Reese, and he joins us now here. Am I right when I say that, Merrill? That's the one thing that you love about this team. They just look to go 1-0 every week. They're not looking down the line here.
You can't. You can't, Dan. And there are many reasons why you can't. But the biggest reason is you don't know who you're going to be playing, and you don't know who they're going to be playing, or you don't know who they're going to be playing with. One key injury changes everything. If you can tell me who's going to be healthy for Kansas City in 2 weeks and who's going to be healthy for the Eagles, I'll give you a better idea. But we don't know that. So the only thing you can do, and Nick Sirianni says this, he was asked Monday or Wednesday at his Wednesday press conference, he was asked about this week. It's Dallas week. Is it big? Do you feel it? And he said, I want the fans to feel it on Sunday. I mean, we know how the fans feel Eagles, Dallas. But as far as I'm concerned, I get the team prepared the same way I do every single week. I mean, do you think I didn't prepare them for the Jets? No, we lost to the Jets, but I prepared them the same way. You have to prepare them as if every game is everything. Every game is the one big shot they have. And as a broadcaster, I can't be worrying about Kansas City or Buffalo or San Francisco. I've got to learn my numbers. I've got to look at my tendencies. I've got to study my biographies and everything about the Dallas Cowboys as if that's the last game we're going to play. That's what you have to do. You cannot look ahead.
Merrill, what makes this week, and I want you to give me and educate me, please, on a perspective on when this became, because when I grew up as a kid, Merrill, for me, because of my uncle, Robustelli, I always assumed, because Bednarik used to come on my show and tell me that it was Eagles and Giants.
Yeah.
I grew up like that. Now, I know it's generational conversation probably, but was it for Meal?
No.
How did it start then, Cowboys and Eagles?
Much, much, much before that. Okay. Let me just look in a book right here. This is my not the weekly media guy, but the all-time Eagles Cowboys results. And I'm just going to look in this book for 1 second to give you a year. And I'm going to tell you the first year they met the Dallas Cowboys. And I'll have a better, let me just tell you, I think it's 61.
It's 60.
Did they play in 60?
The Cowboys' first year was 60.
The Cowboys' first year was 60. Okay. But it was either 60 or 60. The Eagles did beat the Cowboys in 60, but they played them once. Because don't forget, back then, there were no
Cardinals
divisions. There was the NFL with the East and the West.
That's right.
6 teams on each side, and you play 12 games.
Hey, Merrill, don't you remember the St. Louis Cardinals used to be in the NFC East back in the day?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they did. So, but there was no NFC East then.
Yeah.
There was no NFC East. There was the East and the West, because this was before the AFC. So there was only the NFL East and West, and there were no playoffs. The Eagles met the Green Bay Packers, who won the West, for the NFL championship the day after Christmas in 1960. That was it.
So it was best record. It wasn't playoffs. Whoever had the
No
best
playoff.
record met in the NFL title game.
That was it. That was it. The Eagles were 10-2, first in the East. That was it. And they played the Green Bay Packers, and of course they won the only postseason game that Vince Lombardi ever lost. But the reason I'm telling you that is because I think it was about 61 or 62, when a Cowboys linebacker by the name of Leroy Jordan. Do you know that name?
Oh, I know. I knew him very well.
Okay, Leroy Jordan kicked out Timmy Brown's teeth. Timmy Brown was an Eagles running back, handsome, movie star, handsome guy, sang on the side. There's a book out about him this year. But Leroy Jordan kicked out Timmy Brown's teeth, and the war was on. That was it. That was it. That was the first shot. Leroy Jordan kicked out Timmy Brown's teeth, and Eagles fans have hated the Cowboys ever since. And it's been passed on from fathers to sons and daughters, and ever since. Now, you may not be able to find a young fan who realizes that that was the genesis of the whole thing, but I was a kid then, and I remember it, and we all hated the Cowboys forever because Leroy Jordan kicked out Timmy Brown's teeth. It happened way before Vermeil.
Timmy Brown?
Mm-hmm.
Timmy, I'm going to write that down. I gotta ask Jaworski about because, hey, I've never heard this story, and I love the history of the NFL.
Yeah.
So it was Jordan kicking his teeth out, and Landry was the head. Who was the head coach then? Do you know?
Landry. He was the first head coach.
Yeah, of the Cowboys, but who was the coach of the Eagles then?
Oh, Buck Shaw. Well, it was Buck Shaw in 60. So in 61, it would have been Nick Skorich. That was the big thing, that it was promised to Norm Van Brocklin, and he didn't get it. And they took the assistant coach, Nick Skorich, and made him the head coach.
Is that why I think Van Brocklin then went to Atlanta and became the head coach down with the Falcons. Is that right?
He didn't he? He was also the head coach, I think, of the Vikings.
Yeah, Vikings too. That's right. That's because the Vikings came in the league in 60 also with the Cowboys that year. All right, Merrill, for you.
Now, have you ever had Ray Dittinger on?
No, not yet, but I've listened to him.
Ray's one of the great historians, and he wrote
the
encyclopedia. But I think Ray would verify my version that when Leroy Jordan kicked out Timmy Brown's front teeth yet, the war was on. That's when it began.
What is your most memorable moment?
I'm glad that question.
What's that?
I'll ask. How about if I give you my 3 most memorable moments?
To put them in order.
Well, I'll go 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Number 3, December 10th, 1995, and the Eagles met the Dallas Cowboys on a Sunday afternoon. And that Saturday, I took my kids to see a movie, Groundhog Day. And on that day, Eagles had the lead, Cowboys driving in the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter, and they're down deep in Eagles territory. And Barry Switzer was the coach. And he handed the football off to Emmitt Smith, and the Eagles stacked him up cold on 4th down at the line. And we're celebrating. But all of a sudden, the officials get together and determine that that play was executed after the 2-minute warning, and the game should have been stopped. So they threw that play out, and we went into a commercial break, and then we came back, and they're going to do that 4th down again. And Stan Walters was doing the color at the time, and we talked about the fact that, that could be – maybe they are going to go to Novacek this time. Maybe that's what they're going to do. They're going to throw the ball to Novacek. All right, they come back again, and again, same play called a load left. They gave the ball to Emmitt Smith, and they stopped him again. And I screamed, "They stopped him again! They stopped him again!" It's Groundhog Day, because if you remember the movie with Bill Murray, everything keeps repeating. They stopped them again. That was number 3. Number 2, November 3rd, 1996, Eagles and the Cowboys. Again, this time it's Ray Rhodes, again, the Eagles coach, late in his tenure. And the Eagles have the lead, and the Cowboys are driving. And they're inside the 5-yard line, and Troy Aikman lines them up and gives the ball to Emmitt Smith, and they stop him at the 2-yard line. And so they go back into the huddle for second down. And again, not only do they stop him at the 2, they knock him back to about the 4. So it is 3rd and goal for the Cowboys. And we know they're about to stab the Eagles in the heart. And back goes Aikman, and he looks deep into the end zone, and he fires a pass to the corner of the end zone. Now, we're at Texas Stadium, where we're way up in the air, and I can't.
Old Texas Stadium, right?
Yeah, Texas Stadium.
Yeah.
I can't tell because I know that there's an eagle reaching up there coming down with the ball because I can see the helmet, but he screamed, and I can't see a number. And I yell, "It's intercepted. It's intercepted." And out to the 5-yard line, the 10-yard line. And I still can't tell because he's surrounded by people left, right, all over the place, but he's coming up the sideline. So when he gets to about the 20, I look over to my spotter, who is Derek Boyko, who was the Eagles PR director, and I figure, well, he's got the binoculars. He'll see exactly who it was. I look over to him quickly, and where's Derek Boyko? My producer, Joe McPeak, was so excited that he had tackled Derek Boyko, and the two of them are on the ground. So now I look back quickly to the field, and I see number 23. And I go, and Troy Vincent picks off. It's Troy Vincent with the interception. And he's at the 30, he's at the 40, he's at midfield, all the way down to the 10, the 5. And I yell, "The Eagles win, the Eagles win, the Eagles win." And we go to a commercial. And during the commercial, we see the play again. And at the exact instant that I looked over to my spotter, James Willis, who had picked off the pass in the end zone, had lateraled back to Troy Vincent. So I had to play. I just didn't have the right guy. But that was Eagles 31, Dallas 21, an amazing, amazing game. Now, number one is January 11th, 1981. Freezing, just freezing cold. I'm wearing boots, long underwear. We are all bundled up. It's the NFC Championship game. The Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys, Veterans Stadium. And in the first quarter, Ron Jaworski hands off to Wilbert Montgomery, and he goes behind the block of the right guard, Woody Peoples, and the right tackle, Jerry Sizemore. And as we saw that number 31 disappear into the end zone, every single person in the Delaware Valley, it was only the first quarter, we all knew that the Eagles were going to Super Bowl 15. I can never remember anything about Super Bowl 15, but I remember about that NFC Championship game, which the Eagles won 20-7.
I would have to think, Merrill, to that point, that was probably the second biggest win from 1960 all the way to 1981 with the Eagles when they won that NFC Championship, because you had gone from being where you were with Vermeil when he first got there to being NFC champions. That had to be one of the biggest moments in the city's history.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 60 was it when they beat the Packers for the championship. But, here's the funny thing, Dan. I've always told people that the greatest feeling in the world is to win the Super Bowl and wake up the next morning and you're pinching yourself. Did they really win the Super Bowl? Boy, they finally won. It's an amazing field. Happened in Minnesota, Super Bowl 52. Stepped on the plane, and on everybody's seat on that plane, it had their name, even mine. It said Merrill Reese, Super Bowl champion. Every player, every trainer, every coach, every stewardess, it didn't matter. Super Bowl champion. It's the greatest feeling in the world. The worst feeling you can absolutely ever have, worse than any regular season game, worse than any playoff game, is to see your team go all the way to the Super Bowl and lose. That's just such a letdown, and I will never remember. But anyhow, going back to 80, it was after the 80 season, of course, technically into 81. So we go to the airport, and we're getting on the plane, and I'm getting on the plane with the players, and they're not down. And they're saying, they're building each other up, and they're saying, you know what? You have to go to one of these things. You have to experience it to know what it's really like. Next year, we're going to come back and win this thing. except that next year didn't happen for 23 more years. That's why when you're in the Super Bowl, you have to play that game like it's the last game you are ever going to play because you never know.
Merrill, were you more disappointed in '04 or in 22
22,
after the game?
22. No doubt about it. I didn't think they were the better team in 24 in '04. I mean, it was Tom Brady. It was Bill Belichick. And now I'm not taking anything away from Kansas City,
Absolutely not.
but the Eagles had the lead at the half.
Yep.
They had that game and they let it slip away. That game should have been theirs. I still believe that Jalen Hurts outplayed Patrick Mahomes. I still believe the Eagles were the better team that day, but the Kansas City Chiefs won. So that makes them the better team. But I thought the Eagles had more talent on the roster that day, and that game was theirs for the taking, and they blew it.
Merrill,
And
what's different from that 18?
I
What's
can,
different from that 18 team to what you're seeing with this 23 team following a Super Bowl loss? Or wait, the win. You know what? Maybe I should ask you this way. What's different from that '05 team to what you're seeing with this 2023 team that they've been able to keep the focus going and the momentum going even after a loss where in '05 they couldn't keep it going?
it's a good question. It's a really good question. I think this is a more complete team. I think that was a good team. The team that lost in '04 had a great wide receiver, Terrell Owens. And the unfortunate thing is the following year, he separated that team. He divided that locker room. He was snipping at McNabb and talking about McNabb. And that was a team divided. That was the difference. This is a team united. This is a team of friends. There's no bickering in the locker room. There's no complaining when Devontae Smith realizes that A.J. Brown caught 3 more passes than him. They root for each other. This is really a wonderful group of guys coming together. There are no divisive forces. And in my opinion, in 2005, Owens was one of the divisive forces. Now you can probably look back and see an injury here, there, and there, and something else that I'm not accounting for all these years later. But the one thing I do remember is that team was not the same as the guys who were wearing those masks. And that was a couple of years ago. That was Andy's team when they they called themselves the underdogs. But that '05 team didn't have that. Didn't have that.
Is Jalen Hurts becoming your favorite Eagle? Maybe not the best of all these great players. I'm not asking you to ask who's the best player in Eagle history here, but is he becoming your favorite player to cover in your time since you've been the play-by-play man?
I think he has the ability that one day we can look back and say he's the greatest Eagles quarterback of all time or of modern times. Right now, I think that title belongs to Donovan McNabb by just looking at the record books. This is only the 3rd year that Jalen Hurts has been the starter, but he's a great one. He's a great one with a great future, I do believe. And he just gets better, and he's diligent, and he's a great guy, and he's a wonderful leader. He's absolutely terrific. But if you say, who's your favorite leader? I can't say that. I mean, look, Reggie White was the best, maybe the best defensive end of all time, and a wonderful person. There are wonderful people on all of these different teams, some of whom to this day remain as good friends, like Ron Jaworski and Harold Carmichael, and my partner in the broadcast booth, Mike Quick. So you won't find a better guy. If you happen to be in the NovaCare building during the day and you happen to come across Brandon Graham in the hall and he says hello and gives you a hug, your day just got better. And Jason Kelsey's a great guy. And oh my goodness, this team is just packed with people that you really, really feel good about. They're so special, so special. And there's just so many of them. So like Dallas Goddard's a great guy. I mean, these are terrific people. Jordan Mailata, oh my goodness, is he different and special? There's not a bad guy. there's not a bad guy on this team. And a lot of the young ones I haven't gotten to really know that well that quickly because you stop in the locker room and half of them are gone. But you don't see them that often. But I'll tell you what, these are great people from top to bottom. This is a unified team. Nick has done a great job of really bringing this team together. You know, you talk about schemes all the time. Chip Kelly had a scheme that was going to change the Eagles forever, but it didn't. And you hear teams and coaches use the word culture. This team has a culture, a togetherness, a real feeling for one another. The fact that they want to go out and give everything they have. You've never met a guy like Jason Kelsey. He's so special. I mean, yeah, he does a million commercials and he's on the air all the time and doing podcasts, but his passion is football. He wants to be the best, and he will be in the Hall of Fame one day, one of the best centers I've ever been around. But this is a team. This is a team of winners, regardless of what happens this Sunday. This team has resilience. This team has motivation. This team has a great coaching staff behind them, a great owner behind this team. They're really something, Dan. So I don't know what I can't sit here and tell you I'm sure they're going to beat the Cowboys on Sunday. I'm sure they're going to play hard. I'm sure the game is going to be competitive. It could go either way. The Cowboys are a terrific team too. Eagles have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. The Cowboys have C.D. Lamb, who is a handful. But this team is very, very good. And I can't even tell you who's going to be the eventual survivor in the NFC East. But I do know they play another time. This is not the end of the world. They do play another time later in the season. And again, I don't know who's going to be available for that game. You know, this is the first time Jalen Hurts will be in the game the same time with Dak Prescott since September 27th, 2021.
That's crazy.
That's pretty interesting. They haven't been on the same field. And there were a lot of different things. You know, the Eagles coordinator, offensive coordinator, Brian Johnson, great man, young coach, has known Jalen Hurts since he played for Jalen's dad. So he's known Jalen since Jalen was 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old.
And but Brian coached Dak Prescott at Mississippi State.
Loves them both. Loves them both. He's a great coach. Eagles have a new defensive coordinator this year, Sean Desai. Really, really bright. Really special. Of course, the Cowboys have a pretty good one too, and Dan Quinn. So, I mean, these are two great organizations, two great aggregations, and two teams that are going to knock themselves out, hopefully not literally on Sunday, but are going to play with everything they have. And if there was a way of winding the clock forward and putting me in the booth in 10 minutes, I could handle that. I'm ready. I love it.
I'm going to say this to you. Do you know here? How about this stat here, Merrill? Dak Prescott's never thrown an interception at Lincoln Financial.
That's interesting.
He's never thrown a pick in Philly. I mean, so when you think about his success, why do you know? I saw another number. You know, he's 5th all time versus the NFC East when it comes. I think he's got an 800 win percentage versus all the teams in the East. Why do you think again? I mean, he doesn't have the consistency outside of the division, it seems, but inside the division, is it just being common opponent on why he seemingly has great success?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to tell you another stat that's pretty interesting that I just learned today when I was down there. And that is that after 42 games, which are the amount of games that Nick has been together with Jalen Hurts, after 42 games, they are 5th all time in coach quarterback win percentage together. They are a game ahead of, after 42 games, a percentage ahead of Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. So, I mean, some of those others were Bill Walsh and Joe Montana and Dan Marino and Don Shula. But imagine, after 42 games, they're right there. Their winning percentage is amazing.
That's pretty crazy. A couple last questions here for you, Merrill. Do you think this offense, and again, he's having a historic year. Do you think as they're evolving into this passing offense, and I'll give you another number here too, in the last 3 games, the Eagles in the first half have only run the ball 23 times. So they've kind of gotten away a little bit from what they are as an RPO team because they've limited and they're not doing the same RPOs that they did. They're not as many. The volume is not there. But in the first half, it doesn't just seemingly that they're not establishing that. Are you becoming too reliant, you think, and too predictable maybe by going to one major target in A.J. Brown?
Well, I mean, last week, Devontae Smith had his share also.
He did.
And Dallas Goedert had some big receptions. And as far in the second half, they opened it up a little bit more. But you know what? When all is said and done, the Eagles did win. Could have been by 2 touchdowns. And they scored, and then they scored it real quickly again, and it was an onside kick thing. But it was comfortable at the end. It didn't really get hairy. And you know what? Jalen Hurts had a passer rating of 137. Threw 4 touchdown passes for well over 300 yards. So there are a lot of things involved. The defense, I think Howell got away with the quick game right over the middle. Defense took a while to adjust, but they have a lot of young players, a lot of new players, a lot of movement in that secondary, but they'll get better. They will get better. And as far as do they run too much, do they pass too much, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's what works. And the Eagles came roaring from behind, and the Commanders couldn't stop them.
I'm going to leave you with this. I had Jimmy Johnson on 2 days ago, and you're going to like this before we go here. Jimmy was offered the job by Norman Brayman in 1986 before Buddy got the job. And Norman Brayman offered it to him, and Jimmy wanted to go through the 86 season, and he said no. Then they went with Buddy. Think about that for instance. I was floored by it. I had never heard that and him say that he was offered that job. And then Jerry stepped in and said, listen, I'm getting the money together to buy the Cowboys from Bum Bright. They went to school together at Arkansas. Yeah. But Norman, who's still alive actually in South Florida, is a dear friend of ours, and he was a friend of Jerome and I's. And Buddy came down and worked out Jerome in 86, and everyone knew that the Eagles were going to draft him because Norman and Buddy loved him. That was predetermined he was getting drafted.
Well, do you know who was offered the job first?
No.
They fired Marion Campbell, and Marion Campbell got word of the fact that they had offered it to another young coach, and he bowed out gracefully before the last game of the season, and an assistant coach by the name of Fred Bruni took the job. But Norman was from South Florida, and as you said, and he idolized Don Shula.
Shula?
So the person he offered that job to was David Shula.
What a disaster that would have been. Holy cow.
And it broke in the Inquirer Sunday morning, and it broke big. And ultimately they did not get together. But the first person considered for that job was David Shula.
Holy cow. Let me say this to you, Merrill, just between us here and everyone. When Jimmy got the when Jimmy got the head coaching job in Dallas, you know who the first coordinator was? David Shula. And he did that because it was a favor to Don. Jimmy couldn't stand him. He was so bad. Then he ends up getting the Bengals job.
Yes.
I think he's the only coach to ever have 51 losses because they kept him around because the respect that the Brown family had for Shula, because Shula played for the Browns and he played for Paul Brown back in the day. And that's how North Turner got the job in Dallas. And Jimmy regretted hiring that guy so much because he never now he runs a steakhouse, his Pop's Steakhouse. And I love David. He's a great guy, but David Shula, man, I mean, can you imagine? Buddy Ryan, thank God he got that job, man, Merrill, before I get you out of here, what did you think of his tenure as the head coach of the Eagles? Did you think he was a good coach in Philly?
I loved him. I loved him. I thought he was terrific. Now there were various segments of that team who will tell you he was all about the defense, and that team had a quarterback coach by the name of Doug Scoville, who had been a wonderful, wonderful quarterback coach, played at the College of the Pacific, had worked with Bill Walsh, and was a wonderful quarterback coach. And he had Randall Cunningham going in the right direction because Buddy, and then suddenly Doug Scoville was working out on a Saturday and dropped dead of a heart attack down at the Eagles office. And was a dear friend of mine. We played a lot of tennis together. And anyhow, they named Ted Plum the offensive coordinator. He took over the offense, and nobody really rode Randall the way that Doug Scoville did. And Buddy used to say to Randall, "Go out there and make 3 big plays a day. That's it." Randall, you know, when people say to me, "Who's the most exciting player you've ever been around?" Hands down, it was Randall Cunningham.
Merrill, I say this all the time, and I say this to Seth Joyner. Merrill, when you remember how he played, there's only one guy I could compare Randall Cunningham to, and that's Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how he played the game. And the difference in what happened, what I'm understanding on what happened was when John Gruden tried to put him in a sandbox and didn't allow him to be the player that he was, and they tried to confine his play, it narrowed his play. When he went up to Minnesota, and Brian Billick went like this: "I'm not putting you in any sandbox. I'm going to let you do a lot of the stuff that you did in Philadelphia." Plus, he did have those great wide receivers up there with Chris Carter and those guys. But at the end of the day, I mean, they just tried to like really kind of confine him at the end of his time.
Yeah.
They tried to confine him, Merrill, in his last, when John Gruden got there. But when he went up with Minnesota, Brian Billick goes, no. And I say to everyone, Patrick Mahomes is Randall Cunningham.
Well, I think there's a difference, and here's the big difference. I remember now when you talk to me about great offensive coaches, Dick Vermeil had the best advisor ever, and that was Sid Gilman.
Wow.
Sid Gilman, who was the one who really taught.
Was he the OC of that team?
He was not the OC, but offensive advisor to Dick Vermeil. And Dick Vermeil was great. And when he came in, and he gave Randall Cunningham a book, and a roll of film. It wasn't video then; it was a roll of film that he had cut up with 3 great quarterbacks reading their progressions, showing them how to go through the progressions. And he said, "Randall, I want you to look at this thing." I think John Hadle was one. There were several, great quarterbacks. One might have been Johnny Unitas. And I want you to go through this reel of tape. And I want you to tell me, I want you to study this, how they go through the progressions. Randall said, "Thanks, Coach." And he took it home. And 2 days later, he gave it back to Sid and said, "Thanks, Coach. I really enjoyed doing this." And Sid told me there was only one little thing. Sid had put a little teeny weeny piece of paper 1/3 of the way into that reel. And when the film came back, that little bit of paper was still there. Randall was a great player. He was a great athlete. He had it all, but he was not a student of the game. He worked with Buddy Ryan, who said, "Go out there and make 3 big plays." He did not have. Brian Billick held him more accountable. Brian Billick was much more on top of him in preparing for a game.
You think that's why that Eagle team did? You think that's why that Eagle team didn't go as far as it did, is because Randall didn't really do the little things when it came to preparing for games on Sunday?
I think he was really a great natural talent. I don't think he put in the time in the studying. See, that's the antithesis.
You think he's the most talented quarterback the Eagles have ever had, but the most maybe non-prepared?
Most physically talented, with his ability to run, jump, leap, throw, do it all. But that doesn't mean anything.
Oh, agreed.
Jalen Hurts is the first one in the building and the last one to leave. I remember when Randall, during a preseason game, he and a bunch of the guys came out at halftime and said to Buddy, "Hey, we're leaving." And they jumped out of the vet and went to Whitney Houston's birthday party. while the rest of the team was still there for the second half.
You know, Merrill, I say this to folks too. Like, look at Tom Brady, for instance, versus Aaron Rodgers. No one would ever confuse that Aaron Rodgers is not the better athlete than Tom Brady. However, Tom Brady did all the due diligence, and this is how I compare Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a studier of the game.
Oh my God!
That's why he's evolving in the game, and that's why you see a guy like Josh Allen. I think it's tougher to coach Josh Allen than it is to coach Jalen Hurts because Jalen's self-motivated to be coached, whereas Josh, think about it, Merrill. He was at Wyoming, recruited by one Power 5 school and one big-time college program, and that was Wyoming. And that's not even really a Power 5, so he didn't really have great coaching. Jalen's had great coaching around him, whether it was a success or how people looked at it. He had Saban. He had Lincoln Riley. He's got the coaches. Look at the job Shane Steichen's doing now in Indianapolis. He's doing a fabulous job there. And even though they've had so many variety of changes around his life, he's still been around great coaches.
Yes.
So that's helped his involvement.
Yes, but he's worked harder than anybody I've ever seen. He is so level. He doesn't ever go high. He doesn't ever go low. He just pushes ahead. And he's also a great leader. Everyone in that locker room looks up to Jalen Hurts. The respect is enormous. I'm sure it's quite similar to Patrick Mahomes. I understand from Jason Kelsey and through his brother that they just love Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, that he has that kind of effect also. But I've never met Patrick Mahomes. I am around Jalen Hurts, and he's so special, Dan.
Let me sneak one last one in on you. Do you think that Jalen Hurts could have handled Terrell Owens and they would have got the production? Because I'll tell you what I see with AJ. AJ Brown, obviously, not even remotely close to the off-the-field stuff and the kind of character issues that you would have with Owens. But what you have with a player is, you know what you're getting out of AJ? You're getting the 2005 season, Merrill, you never got with T.O. You got the 04 season, which was spectacular, but you never got the 05 season. You're getting that 05 season because it's a T.O. performance here. You think Jalen would have been able to deal and play with Terrell Owens if he had him in this team right now?
Dan, I don't think General George Patton could have handled Terrell Owens.
That's the nicest rip I've ever seen Merrill Reese ever give somebody without really ripping them. That's the best rip without ripping, I think.
I'll leave it at that.
Hey, Merrill, have a great call Sunday. We'll be all listening. Thank you so much. Have a great one, too. And I appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much, my friend.
Take care, Dan.
You got it. The great Merrill Reese. All right. Hit the like button. Keep it here on the National Football Show.
Football and Hooters, the perfect